The first thing I am aware of is cold. A cold that has nothing to do with weather and everything to do with the fact that the body it presses against is no longer breathing the way a body should. Somewhere, very far above me, a man is shouting in a voice that keeps cracking apart, and a small girl is wailing, and the wet sound of a palm pressing down again and again on a child's chest is keeping rhythm with both of them. I drift inside that darkness for what feels like a long time, and then a different memory begins to push itself up through the dark. My own memory from a place that is not this place. I had been crossing a road on my way to register at Jinling University. The semi-trailer had come around the corner faster than anything that heavy ought to be able to move, and the last thing I saw was the front grille and a flash of orange paint. So, am I dead? I think the question dryly, almost without surprise. The truck had hit me at near 80 kilometers an hour. There was no honest way to walk away from that. I think about the small life I had built, and how easily it can be summed up. I had been an orphan, taken in by a couple who were kind to me until they conceived a son of their own. And after that, I became an extra mouth at their table. Never beaten, never cast out, only quietly subtracted from the family arithmetic. I did not hate them. They had not abandoned me a second time. They had fed me. They had paid for school. So I had repaid them by working. I had been first in my class from primary school onward, and I had taken the third highest score in the county on the liberal arts entrance exam, and I had been admitted to Jinling University, and on the way to that very admission, a runaway truck had taken everything I had built. I feel regret. I feel, also, a thin sliver of relief. There had been no one in the world for whom my leaving would mean anything more than a chair empty at a holiday table. I had never possessed enough to lose. While I am making my peace with all this, a voice begins to call to me through the dark. Several voices familiar and strange at the same time, tugging at a heartstring I am sure I do not have. A buzzing fades from my ears. I hear a man cry out for Galen. My child, wake up quickly. I hear a small girl scream that her brother does not want her anymore. I feel hands shaking me, hands pressing on my chest, the burning bloated weight of salt water inside my throat and lungs. I try to make a sound and instead vomit a great surge of seawater out onto the rocks, and the world comes back into me through that single retch. Light noise, the weight of a wool cloak, the smell of brine and wet stone. I open my eyes. I see men in black and gray wool, men with western faces and long hair, kneeling around me with anxiety and joy, fighting each other across their faces. I see beaches and reefs, and the long withdrawing tongue of a tide that very nearly swallowed me whole. A lord in a heavy cloak pulls me into his arms and tears fall instantly onto my hair. A small blonde girl, no more than 4, throws herself at my arm and sobs without any pride at all into the wet wool of my sleeve. And then, like a tide of its own, a second set of memories floods up out of somewhere deeper than my own thoughts and lays itself down inside me. The memories of a boy named Tarth, eldest son of House Tarth of Evenfall Hall on the island of Tarth, 8 years old, who had heard a fisher boy speak of a faint cyan and orange shimmer in a sea cave at Mورnز Point, and who had been reckless and proud enough to dive into rising water in pursuit of a legendary sword. I have transmigrated. The realization lands quietly, with very little of the noise I would have imagined a thing like this should make. Westeros, the Stormlands, House Tarth. This is the world of Game of Thrones. The series I had loved most on Earth, the one I had read in its book form after finishing the show, the one with dragons and Essos and Ashai and the unknown lands beyond. And the small blonde girl clutching my arm, with her freckles and her sturdy little body and her sapphire eyes, is Brienne. Brienne the Beauty. The only female knight in the Seven Kingdoms. The girl who, on the page, would mention only ever once that her older brother, 4 years older than her, had drowned when she was 4. That brother was Tarth. That brother is me. I should be in shock. Instead, what I feel is something close to relief. On Earth I had been almost no one to almost no one. Here I am, the heir to an island, the son of an earl, the elder brother of a girl whose character was among the most upright in the entire show. The body settles around me. The new memories knit themselves into the old, and the old begin to feel more like a thing I once dreamed than a place I once lived. I can recall everything Galen recalled from the moment he first knew himself in this world. I am 8 years old and I am alive, and my father is crushing the breath out of me with the fierceness of his relief. Father, I manage. I'm fine. I pat his back as best I can with arms that still feel half made of seawater, and Earl Selwyn finally pulls back enough to look at me. His usual mask of composed Stormlander wisdom has fallen completely off his face. There is only the wild-eyed joy of a man who had been preparing himself, in the space of a single hourglass, to bury a second son. He feels the chill in my body and tears off his black velvet cloak and bundles me inside it, and he says, "Come, we are going back to the castle." He means to take me to Maester Armon at once. "Wait, father," I say. They look at me, all of them. The steward Claude with his receding hair and his anxious balding pate, the knights and guards in their boiled leather, my little sister with her tear-streaked freckled face. Without explanation, I step toward the reef where the tide had spat me up, and I begin to feel through the seawater and gravel for what I half remembered carrying ashore. There, a faint clear shimmer deep beneath the water. I close my hand around it. I lift it. Everyone freezes and holds their breath at once, The blade in my hand is not a thing of mortal forging. The whole length of it gives off a soft cyan light, like the breath of the deep sea drawn upward into steel. The light is not dazzling, it is gentle. It ripples like the surface of the Bay of Tarth on a moonlit night, and along both edges of the blade run two thin orange-red lines, exactly like that sliver of horizon just before the sun rises out of the sea. The crossguard and the hilt are made of a gray-white material as warm as ivory and as cold-hard as metal, and at the pommel, an oval blue-black gemstone is set, ringed by a band of tiny inscriptions. The whole sword in my 8-year-old hand weighs nothing at all. It feels like morning light, and though I am holding it for the first time in this body, every man on that beach already knows its name. The name speaks itself in their ears as if a low whisper had been laid into all of them at once. Oathkeeper, a holy sword, one of the knights breathes. The sword of morning light. Oathkeeper, the young lord found it. One after another, the men in their boiled leather drop to one knee, their long swords thudding against the wet stone, and they look at me with the kind of feverish devotion that is dangerous to wear easily. Brian, still streaked with tears, points at the sword in my hand and gabbles excitedly to our father. Father, brother, Oathkeeper. Earl Selwyn's mouth hangs open. Steward Claude meets his lord's eye, and his shock turns slowly into a wild joy he cannot find words for. And, while they all stare at the sword I am holding, something else has happened that none of them can see. A panel has appeared in my line of sight, written in translucent blue script, a thing that hangs in the air directly in front of my eyes the way a window might hang on a wall. Gallon Tarth. Title, None. Strength 3.12. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic blank. Skills and percentages: swordsmanship at 3, archery at 7, riding at 4, the common tongue of Westeros at 27, swimming at 29. Legendary bloodlines, 3 of them: Blood of the Even Star at 3% development, Targaryen bloodline at 0, Storm King bloodline at 0, Storm King bloodline at 0. Legendary weapon, Oathkeeper, gold tier quality at maximum, cannot be upgraded. Legendary pet, none. Judgment points 0. Beside several of these lines is a small gray plus sign, and at the bottom is that one strange word, judgment, with a number after it, and the number is empty. So this is my golden finger. I call out for a system in my mind, the way 1,000 transmigrator novels had taught me you were supposed to, and there is no answering voice. Whatever this panel is, it has no intelligence to converse with. The pluses are gray, which means I cannot click them yet. The judgment points line sits there with its empty number. So, in order to add to any of these attributes, I must first acquire judgment points. How exactly does one acquire judgment points? The panel does not say. I feel the small headache that any transmigrator would feel at being given a manual without instructions. And I cannot help wondering whether this golden finger of mine is a gift of my crossing over, or whether it has been pulled out of the sea, along with this sword. Legendary weapon, Oathkeeper Gold. The only thing on the panel whose quality is already at the very top. The blade in my hand catches my attention again. I bend my eye to the inscriptions at the pommel, and the small ring of letters resolves itself for me alone. Just made. Oathkeeper, the legendary holy sword that the Maiden of the Seven in the Legends of the Seven-Pointed Star had bestowed upon Galadon of Morn in the Age of Heroes. The sword is real. The sword is mine. I cannot quite hide my excitement. In Westeros, what knight does not dream of carrying a named ancestral blade? The oldest houses pride themselves on a single piece of Valyrian steel, and now, 8 years old and still wet with seawater, I am holding a sword that surpasses Valyrian steel, as morning light surpasses lamplight. I lift it experimentally. It cuts the air with no resistance at all, and its weight perfectly suits the small body I have inherited, as if it has measured me and adjusted itself. And to settle the matter completely, on the backswing I clip the protruding corner of a reef beside me, and a chunk of stone the size of my head slides cleanly off into the water. The cut is smooth as a mirror. Even cutting through iron like butter would not begin to describe it. Father, is this? Earl Selwyn's voice has gone trembling and raspy. Oathkeeper. He had named me Gallon to bless me with the name of the legendary hero, never imagining that his eldest son would actually find the holy sword that had been lost since the Dawn Age. He reaches out a trembling hand to touch the blade, and the moment his fingertip brushes the steel, he yanks it back with a hiss as if struck by lightning. A bright red burn has appeared on his fingertip, with a faint thread of smoke curling upward from it. The holy sword chooses its master. My lord, Claude says quietly. There is no displeasure on my father's face. There is only joy brighter than before. He commands the steward to try, and Claude, jaw set, reaches out and is also burned. The two of them look at one another. He commands every knight and guard to try as well, and one by one swallowing, they reach out and one by one they recoil with cries of pain and burns that will become small permanent honors on their hands. Not one of them looks angry. Every one of them looks reverent. They never expected, in any life of theirs, that their young masters tumble into the sea would mean they had been present when Tarth's lost holy sword came back into the world. I plant Oathkeeper into the sand and pull it free again, and the men climb back onto their feet, and Earl Selwyn at last lets the smile he has been holding back blossom out into something close to wonder. Come, he says, back to the castle. The guards roar their assent. He takes a leather sheath from one of the men and wraps the sword in it, and he scoops me up onto his horse with him. And Steward Claude takes Brienne, and the whole company turns its back on the rising tide and rides for Evenfall Hall. Evenfall Hall sits on a hill on the western coast of Tarth, looking across the Bay of Tarth towards Storm's End on the opposite shore of the strait. The castle is built of weathered grey stone, walls thick and rugged with sea weather, and at its center rises the tall Dusk Star Tower with the family banner of yellow sun and blue moon, mottled green with sea rust, marking 1,000 years of patient holding. By the time we ride into the courtyard, old Maester Armin is already waiting, gowned in grey, his chain heavy across his chest. Fires lit, hot soup made ready, he reports the moment my father dismounts. He does not yet know about the sword. He cannot understand why every face in the company is lit not with the grey of grief, but with a fervor none of them is bothering to hide. Inside the great hall, by the fire, Claude and Maester Armand strip my wet clothes off me and bundle me into a thick wool blanket and set me in front of the hearth. Claude's breath catches a little when he sees me set Oathkeeper carefully aside on the flagstones. Maester Armand eyes the strange beautiful longsword and decides kindly to ask later. He puts a bowl of meatball soup with cinnamon dates and mint into my hands and makes me sip it slowly. Brienne keeps adding small handfuls of kindling to the fire because in her 4-year-old mind, a brighter fire will mend her brother faster. I cannot help reaching out and pulling her into my arms. She is not the cold, distant brother of my last life. This one burrows trustingly inside the wool blanket until only her freckled nose and her 2 bright sapphire eyes peek out at me from the fold. The closeness of it cracks something open in me that I had thought was shut for good. Earl Selwyn watches us across the hearth and a slow, deep smile of relief works itself across his face. Then his eye falls on Oathkeeper and he steels himself, and he reaches for it. This time he has learned. He grasps only the leather sheath. Even so, the weight surprises him, 30 or 40 pounds at least, twice the weight of an ordinary 2-handed sword, and he must use both hands to hold it level. Yet at Morn's point I had swung the same blade easily one-handed. The sword adjusts its weight for its master and turns leaden in any other hand. He examines the inscriptions at the pommel. Just made, Oathkeeper. He sets the blade down very carefully and exhales. He stares for a long while at the family banner above the hearth. 2 suns on a red field and 2 moons on a blue, the sigil of House Tarth. House Stark has been glorious. House Baratheon has been glorious. House Lannister, House Gardner, even the upjumped Tyrells of Highgarden, all of them have been glorious. But House Tarth has not left a real mark on the history of Westeros for a very long time. The head of House Tarth had once been honored with the title Evenstar. No one calls them that any longer. The end of dusk, my father whispers under his breath, the family motto coming to him unbidden, the coming of dawn. He looks across the hearth at me cradling Brienne, and he allows himself for the first time to think that perhaps Galon is the dawn of House Tarth. When the fire has settled, and Brienne has dozed off against my chest, my father turns his head toward me again. Galon, he says, and his voice has a careful edge. Why did you jump into the sea, and into that cave without thinking? Was it Old Feck's son who led you? I understand at once what he is really asking. No, father, I tell him, shaking my head. Old Feck's son did nothing. You don't need to trouble him. In the borrowed memories, the fisher boy had begged the old Gallan not to go in. Earl Selwyn's eye holds mine for a moment longer, weighing whether some scheme might have been at work against the heir of House Tarth. But in the end, he believes me. Then why were you so certain the holy sword was in the cave? He asks. I think for a moment and tell him a small useful lie. I heard a kind of call from the shore. A call from the holy sword. His eyes widen, his chest heaves, and I nod gravely. After all, I do not know yet how strangely I shall behave in the days ahead, and there is no harm in laying down, this early, the suggestion that the sword speaks to me in ways no other man can understand. Earl Selwyn fills in the rest of the picture for himself. That his son might be marked for some great responsibility. That his son might be a man favored by the Seven. The conviction settles on him the way snow settles on a roof, by its own slow weight. He will not tell me, but I see in the rapid breath behind his composure that he has taken on, in a single afternoon, a hope so heavy it has begun to frighten him. I do not feel any of that weight. I am quietly teasing my sister, who has begun to drowse, pinching one of her plump warm hands with my thumb and forefinger. 4-year-old Brienne is sturdy and warm and thoroughly cute. There is no hint yet of the nearly 2-meter warrior she will become a decade later. No awkward growth, no crooked teeth. Her sapphire eyes are exactly as the books described them. The freckles are exactly where the books said they would be. I find that I am very fond of this little sister already. I think how, in the original story, she was called ugly mostly because of her height and her crooked teeth, and her broad-built strength, and not because the bones of her face are bad, and I begin to think that, given a little quiet attention, this small girl could grow into a tall woman of great strength who is also unmistakably handsome. Skin care, a way to keep her teeth straight, the right balance of exercise. I file the notes away. I have time. I have nothing but time. I reopen the panel in my mind and read it through again, slowly, while my sister sleeps against my chest. Strength 3.12, agility 4.1. Those numbers, I guess, mean that adult average is somewhere near 10. Spirit 12.8. that is too high for an 8-year-old, and the only honest explanation is the soul of a transmigrator stacked on top of a child's accumulated memories. The skill percentages match what I find in Gallen's memories, writing in archery and swordsmanship that are real but only beginning. The common tongue at 27% because he is still only 8 years into reading and writing it. Swimming at 29 because he was born on an island and grew up in the sea. I assume 100% means full mastery for an ordinary man. Then the bloodlines. And these are the things I had not expected. 3 legendary bloodlines, all of which the panel declares undeveloped or near to it. Blood of the Evenstar runs in House Tarth back to the Dawn Age, and it must be the reason Brienne, in the books, grows as tall and as strong as she does. Perhaps a sliver of Evenstar awakening in her body. The Storm King bloodline traces to House Durrandon, the Storm Kings of old, who held Storm's End before House Targaryen's coming. House Tarth and House Durrandon intermarried for centuries, and the trait shows even now in our hair. The men of House Tarth, like the men of House Baratheon afterward, carry the thick black hair of the Storm Kings, while Brienne, like an Evenstar daughter, carries the pale gold of her mother's people. That is the pair I might have expected. The third, the Targaryen bloodline, is the surprise. House Baratheon, ruling the Stormlands these 2 centuries, had married into House Tarth quite often, and House Baratheon's own veins carry the blood of old Valyria diluted but real. Through those Baratheon-Tarth marriages, a thread of Targaryen has been woven into me, almost too thin to call mine. For most of House Tarth, this thread is meaningless. For me, it means I can put points into it. That bloodline matters more than I want to admit to myself. To allocate enough points to wake the Targaryen blood in me would mean, in time, the gift of fire immunity, the answering call of dragons. Dragons are not optional in this world. Having a dragon and not having a dragon are 2 utterly different things, so that is the one I will be hungriest to feed. Not now I do not even know how to earn judgment points. But one day, the steward's voice breaks across my study of the panel. "Young master, the bath is ready, please come up to your room and rest." Claude has appeared at my elbow with a soft smile and a faint flush across his bald head from the firelight. I look down and realize that even though I am dry now, the salt is still gritty across my skin. I gently lift Brienne onto my father's lap, and Earl Selwyn settles her against him with a gentle, weary affection. "Go on," he says. "Get some good rest." I follow Claude up the spiral granite stairs of the Dusk Star Tower, the iron oil lamps in the wall throwing long flickering shadows onto the stone, the muffled sound of the sea coming up through a high small window. My bedroom is on the 5th floor, a heavy oak door carved with a yellow sun and blue moon. Inside, a faded tapestry of Galadon of Mornay hand in hand with the Maiden of the Seven, a thick wool rug, a wooden tub already steaming with hot water, lavender petals and herbs floating on the surface, a fire in the hearth, and a small adjoining door slightly ajar that opens into the maid's narrow alcove. A girl of 13 or 14 with chestnut hair tied in a ponytail rises from the tub side and curtsies. Galena, the maid my late mother had personally chosen for me, has served me since I was small enough to need her to dress me. She helps me out of my salt-stiff clothes with the easy skill of long habit, and I sink into the warm water and the smell of rosemary, and feel my body give up the last of its tension. I tell her she may go for now. She bows away into her alcove. I lean my head back against the rim of the wooden tub and close my eyes and think. I have arrived too early. By Maester Armin's reckoning, the year is 275 after the conquest. The Mad King Aerys still sits the Iron Throne. Ned Stark is 12, only 4 years older than me. The tourney at Harrenhal is more than a decade away. The War of the Usurper later. I am, for the moment, in the same generation as Jaime Lannister and Ned Stark and Patyr Baelish, all of them still children. Interesting, I think, with my eyes closed, and the corner of my mouth lifts in a small smile. By the time the real plot begins, I shall be around 30, in the prime of my strength, and I shall have spent 20 years getting ready. I am the heir to Evenfall Hall, and the legitimate son of a lord. Tarth is not the wealthiest fief on the eastern coast. That title still belongs to the Arbor, but it has a population near 150,000. 3 towns and 20 or 30 villages, mountains and grasslands and forests, a fleet of more than a dozen trading ships that can be turned to war. With one word, my father can muster 20 knights and 3,000 soldiers. Tarth lies northeast of Storm's End, the natural shield of House Baratheon. It is the closest island in Westeros to the continent of Essos. 5 days' sail to Pentos, 3 to Tyrosh, faster than the run to King's Landing. A truly excellent place to start. I find I cannot find a fault with it. With the knowledge of a transmigrator, with 20 years of patient work, with a brother who is heir and a sister who is Brienne, with 3 bloodlines and a holy sword and a panel that promises growth in exchange for judgment, I might do a great deal. When the War of the Usurper comes, House Tarth could fairly take its share of the spoils for backing Robert. I find myself, soaking in the steam, beginning to plan. Galena's voice reaches me through the alcove door. Would I like more hot water? I rise from the tub instead, water sliding off me, and tell her I am finished. She drapes a soft warm towel around me and dries me as she has always dried me. I am 8, and have not yet developed, and to refuse her now would be the strange thing. She hands me underclothes and a black silk sleeping robe. She rings a small bell, and a few sturdy serving women come and carry the tub and its cooling water out of the room. Galena tidies the bed once more and bows herself away. I am not ready to sleep yet. The afternoon light is still bright, and I push the window open onto the deep blue sea and the pale blue line of the horizon, and I look down at Sapphire Port where the merchants are docking and the fishing boats are coming home, and at Sapphire Town's red roofs beyond, and at the green of distant pasture above the cliffs. The walls of Evenfall Hall are 20 feet high, built of gray granite 10 feet thick at the base, crowned by a low crenellated parapet with iron arrow slits, and at the southeast a half-collapsed watchtower leans against the curtain wall, its ruin overgrown with stubborn green sea rocket. Dusk Star Tower itself stands 100 feet tall, a beacon in fog for the merchant ships passing through the strait. Other towers, kitchens, armory, storerooms, flank it under weathered bluish-black tiles, white smoke rising from two of their square chimneys. The courtyard below is paved with gravel and crushed seashells, neat as a swept hearth, nothing at all like the muddy yards of Winterfell I remember from television. Behind the castle, the boughs of ancient trees mark the Godswood, where the boy I was used to play. 1,000 years of careful Tarth holding has built a castle that is both beautiful and stubborn. Whatever I had imagined of medieval life, this is better. Eventually I close the window and climb into bed, and to my surprise I sleep more soundly than I had ever slept on Earth. Perhaps 3 legendary bloodlines come with the gift of healthy rest. In the morning I wake feeling rested in a way I do not remember ever feeling. Angelina calls a cheerful good morning from her alcove and brings me hot water and toiletries. The toothbrush in the cup is of course only a chewed twig the length of a chopstick, the upper third frayed into rough bristles. I dip it in salt as the previous Galen used to do, and clean my teeth as best I can, and my gums sting and bleed a little for the trouble. I shall need to invent a proper toothbrush. I shall need to invent a great many small things. The thought makes me smile. Galena dresses me, a close-fitting linen shirt, a dark gray woolen silk robe embroidered with antique gold thread patterns, and fastened with 3 ebony buttons, plain black linen trousers tied below the knee with leather cords, a pair of high cowhide boots for the rocky island ground, and around my waist a tanned cowhide belt with a gold buckle and a wave-carved tail. The whole outfit marks me a noble at a glance. A commoner could not afford it after a year of work. In my last life I had owned 1 or 2 sets of clothes, replaced only when worn through, and I had refused every confession a girl made to me in school because I had been ashamed of how I dress here. I stand before the half-length brass mirror in the south corner of the bedroom and look at the boy I have become. Short, dark, slightly curly hair with messy ends, the black hair of the Storm Kings, the same black as my father's. A pair of clear blue eyes ringed faintly with light gray near the pupil, like a sea shrouded in morning mist. Pale skin with a few freckles scattered on either side of the nose. Long slender brows, a straight nose, a chin that is firm but not yet hard, nearly 5 feet tall already, far above what 8-year-olds should manage. I look at the boy in the brass and I cannot help thinking, with a small private smile, that this is a face that suits the master of Oathkeeper. I leave the bedroom and go down the spiral stair to the great hall, where the maids are already laying out breakfast. "The young master," they cry, and they bow with a brightness in their eye that they did not used to have when I came down. The news of the Holy Sword has plainly already gone through the household. Steward Claude tells me my father rode to Sapphire Town the previous night and has not yet returned, and Brienne is still asleep. I sit at my usual place. Breakfast is a feast. 3 kinds of bread, 4 kinds of meat, 2 soups, apples and blood oranges, and pumpkin chunks roasted to take the edge off the richness. The cooking is plain by my old standards, but the ingredients are excellent. I eat and enjoy. And then, instead of waiting for my sister to wake, I climb to the 3rd floor of the adjacent tower, where Maester Armand makes his lessons among his ravens. Maester Armand greets me with sparkling eyes. He had been the one Earl Selwyn told of the Holy Sword the night before, and he had not slept much for the excitement of it. The chain across his gray robes is heavier than most maesters' chains. Bronze for astronomy, black iron for history, silver for medicine, gold for arithmetic, a rare platinum link for mastery of Valerian and ancient texts, and a small copper at the end for navigation and cartography. He has served House Tarth for 30 years. He is 60 now, his hair streaked with gray, but his eye has not lost its sharpness. He tells me kindly that I should rest after yesterday's drowning. I shake my head. I tell him that knowledge matters as much as steel. He is delighted. Few noble children, especially boys, choose study over riding and hunting. To find that the new bearer of the Holy Sword has chosen to study is, for him, a small private joy. He tests me on heraldry first. "House Royce of the Vale," he asks. I recall in 2 seconds. Runestone north of Goldtown along the narrow sea, sigil of pebbles between 2 rows of runes on an orange field. Words we remember. And without his asking I add the rest. That the Royces are one of the few houses of the Vale to descend from the first men. That their kings of the Bronze Age held the title Bronze Kings. That they once carried the Valyrian steel sword Lament until it was lost in the Dance of the Dragons. That they yet possess ancestral bronze armors inscribed with old runes, said to ward the wearer. I remember things now, I notice as I speak, with a clarity that the boy I was on Earth never had. Memory has thickened into something dependable. Maester Armin's admiration is plain. He asks for House Valerian, and I give him Driftmark and the silver seahorse on a sea-green field, and the words, the old, the true, the brave, and tell him that the Valerines came to Driftmark before the Targaryens came to Dragonstone, that they share Valerian features, though they are not a Dragonlord house, that the office of Master of Ships on the small council usually goes to their head. He stops me there. Galon, he says, you have mastered heraldry. We shall begin a new lesson. He writes 3 options on a piece of parchment and slides it to me. Geography and cartography of the 7 kingdoms. Noble etiquette and laws of succession. Medicine and herbal knowledge. I think for a moment and choose geography. Etiquette and laws can wait. Medicine I need only in passing, but a transmigrator without a map is a transmigrator wasting his good fortune. Then I add a request. May I take a second course as well? Of course, he says. Which? Valerian, I answer. The maester's brow lifts. Valerian is taught chiefly to children of House Targaryen and House Valerion. To Westerosi nobles outside that circle it is almost useless, since only the free cities use it. I give him the smaller of my 2 reasons, that I hear merchants from the free cities speaking it at Sapphire Port and am curious about Essos, and hope to travel there one day. The truer reason, that one cannot ride a dragon by speaking only the common tongue I keep to myself. Travel to the free cities. The maester nods. That is no bad ambition for a young heir. He has spent his 30 years on Tarth meeting merchants from Essos and even from the Summer Isles, and he believes a journey would broaden me. Very well, he says. Then I shall teach you both. The lessons will be condensed. You will need to spend more time studying. He unrolls a great map on the long table, and we begin with Westeros, and I pick it up almost as fast as he can lay it down, because I have spent hours of my last life staring at electronic maps of these very lands. He smiles at the speed of it. Then he takes down a slim volume of Valyrian poetry and begins to teach me Valyrian script and pronunciation by way of verse. Not the textbook a sane teacher would have chosen, but in a world without dictionaries one teaches what one has. And I grit my teeth and listen. After 2 incense sticks of Valyrian I check my panel quietly. The skill bar does not yet show Valyrian. Below 1% the panel does not list a language at all, I gather. Not a problem. I have no judgment points to spend, and no idea yet how to earn them. And Valyrian will come. A maid knocks. My lord is back in the hall and asks for us. I bow to Maester Armon, and he tells me with a smile that today's lesson ends here, and I follow the maid down to the great hall, where my father is waiting with a sword in his hand. From the hilt I know it for Oathkeeper, but the crude leather wrap of yesterday is gone. In its place is a splendid black scabbard, freshly forged. So that is where my father went the night before. To Byron, the most skilled blacksmith on Tarth, in Sapphire Town, to have a scabbard hammered through the night. The faint redness in my father's eyes tells me he has not slept. Galon, the scabbard is ready, he says, and offers the sword to me with both hands. I take it one-handed and examine it. Black iron, hammered rough on the surface for a sturdy feel, lined in pine wood that is light and shows its honey gold grain along the seam, a band of gray sharkskin near the throat for grip, fine threads of silver tracing across the iron and around the wood for a cold gleaming line, about 4 feet from sheath mouth to point. Most strangely, the leather clasp has been set up not for the hip, but for the back. My father has thought ahead. The diagonal shoulder rig will fit a small body better than a hip belt would. I am 8 and not quite the height for a 4-foot sword on the hip. On the back, in another year or 2, I shall wear it perfectly. I draw it a few inches. The clear, cool light of the blade flares, that soft, pleased metallic note hums, and a third of the breathtaking blade leaves the sheath. Every face in the hall fixes on it and breathes shallower. The sword is so beautiful that simply looking at it can absorb a man's mind. I sheathe it, and I weigh the scabbarded sword in my hand. It is at the very edge of what a child of my size could comfortably carry. I had noticed my father straining when he passed it to me. To me it is light, so Oathkeeper has its own opinion of the proper weight for its master, and adjusts. No wonder the panel calls its quality maxed and unimprovable. Thank you, father, I say, and Earl Selwyn nods at me with the smile of a man who has not yet stopped being grateful that I am alive to thank him. Brienne comes running in then with sand on her hands and her bare feet, and throws herself into my arms. She has been at the beach building little castles. Galon, my father says, watching her. Brienne is 4.5. Tomorrow let her join you in Maester Armin's lessons. I nod. She is sturdier and brighter than girls her age, and the right age for the common tongue. Claude is sent to tell the kitchens to prepare lunch, and as he goes, Maester Armon hurries in clutching a letter still warm from a raven, and tells my father that the queen has born a healthy boy, named by King Aerys Viserys Targaryen. My father chuckles. After a string of miscarriages and stillbirths, the queen has finally born the king a healthy prince, he says. The king's mood will improve a little. I shake my head slightly to myself and say, so it is Viserys, the sleeping dragon. The maester says there is a second letter. Lord Tywin, to celebrate the prince's birth, plans a great tourney at Lannisport 1 month hence. My father reads it and frowns, and says he will not go. He will have Claude arrange a gift to send for the prince's name day. The maester nods and moves to leave. but my father bids him stay and sit and eat. There is something he wishes to discuss. I sit down with my sister on my lap, while my father and the maester between them lay out for one another the political map of Westeros. The open quarrel between King Aerys and his hand Lord Tywin. The small disagreements that have grown into open ones. The upcoming 10th name day of Stannis the second son of Lord Steffan Baratheon. The dwarf son of Lord Tywin, who has not died as everyone expected, but is growing up at Casterly Rock. I listen. Most of these names are familiar from a life I cannot mention. They are children for the moment. Through their conversation I begin to understand why the king is called the Mad King, not only for his cruelty but for the strangeness of his ideas. He had once proposed to Lord Rickard Stark of Winterfell that a new wall be built 100 leagues north of the existing one to claim all the land between. And Lord Rickard had stood there speechless, because no one had any idea how a new wall might be constructed. And the area in question was inhabited by 10,000 wildlings, whose displacement would have meant a war. Visiting Sunspear, the king had told the Princess of Dorne that he meant to dig a great underground canal through the Red Mountains, to bring water down from the rainforests, to make the Dornish desert bloom with flowers, and so on. Listening, I almost choke on a piece of bread laughing. Aerys and his second son Viserys, I think, are cut from precisely the same cloth. Viserys' whole talk in the books about waking the dragon must have been learned at his father's knee. I notice the contempt my father is at no pains to hide for the king, and the careful praise he gives Lord Tywin. Whether Tywin is patiently driving the king mad or merely doing competent service in difficult conditions, I cannot tell yet. Either way, his administrative skill, military leadership, and political acumen are the first rank in the Seven Kingdoms. After lunch, Brienne and I go up to nap. Children grow on sleep. When I rise, I sling Oathkeeper across my back and walk down to the Godswood behind the castle. There among the old trees a tall brown-haired man in plate armor stands waiting with his back to me, and at the sound of my step he turns, and a sword-scarred face splits into a smile. Sir Goodwin, Master-at-Arms of Evenfall Hall, who placed 6th at the tourney at Highgarden 7 years ago, stern with the soldiers, easier with me. Gallon, he says, your father told me you were well, and asked me to continue your lesson today. He looks me over, color, gait, and is satisfied that yesterday's drowning has done me no lasting harm. I make him laugh by answering that any kid on Tarth has gulped down a bit of seawater in his time, and he warns me not to say so where my father can hear. Then his eye finds the sword across my back. Gallon, is this the holy sword you found at Morn's Point? I draw it for him in the long afternoon shadows of the Godswood, and that clear, cool light flares again. His face goes still. Truly extraordinary, he whispers. He is from the Riverlands, near Harrenhal, and he had heard the awe of the others yesterday and held back a small doubt. The doubt is gone. He admits, to me alone, that the sight is more stirring than even Arthur Dane drawing dawn. He says, with a shrug and a small grin, that he will not let me practice with such a sword. A graze from it is more than a scratch. I tell him I have brought it not for sparring but for testing. Yesterday it had taken a corner off a reef without my noticing. I want to know more. Goodwin's eye lights up. What knight does not want to know more about a holy sword? He points me at an old dried stump in the Godswood. 2 men round, cropped off 2 feet from the ground, marked with 100 arrow scars from my own past archery practice. Try cutting that, he says. I take Oathkeeper in both hands and swing once. A sound like a blade through parchment, sharp and almost dry. The upper third of the stump slides off diagonally and thuds onto the moss, throwing dark earth into the air. The cut is mirror smooth. Goodwin walks over, bends, looks closely, and finds himself for a long moment unable to speak. Cutting through a seasoned thick stump with a greatsword is a strenuous chore. The blade should bind 2 or 3 inches deep at best. I have just sliced a third clean off, and the blade had felt to me as if it were cutting stiff cardboard. There had been a moment of resistance, and then the sword had slid through as smoothly as silk. I swing again to be certain. A larger chunk slides off this time. Even cleaner, even less resistance. The thing feels like a small twig under my hands. I cannot quite hide my own delight. It reminds me, ridiculously, of striking at cabbage heads with a stick when I was a boy on Earth. Goodwin watches me swing, breathing harder. Then, without a word, he removes his own plate vest and walks over to the wooden practice dummy I always use, and fits the vest onto the dummy and ties it in place. Try that, he says. Are you sure, sir? I ask. Plate is not cheap. The vest alone is worth 2 gold dragons, and a fisherman on Tarth earns a year of work for 20 or 30 silver stags. He shrugs. To know the truth of a sword, you must test it on real armor. He believes Lord Selwyn will repay the cost. Fair, I say. I set my stance, and grip the hilt with both hands, and I swing with everything my 8-year-old body can put behind it. Sparks, a hard, clean ring, and when the blade halts, I see that the chest of the plate has been slit diagonally, near 3/4 of its length, only barely held together by the lower hem. Beneath, the wood of the dummy carries a deep gash. A man wearing that armor would have been gutted and dead. Goodwin looks like a man who has just glimpsed a future he had not expected. If the 8-year-old can do this, he is plainly thinking, what will the 18-year-old do, and what will that 18-year-old do on a charging warhorse? He shakes himself. Gallon, he says, this sword truly lives up to its name as a holy blade. I nod. The 7-pointed star tells me that Galladon of Mornay drew Oathkeeper only 3 times in his life. Each time for a foe of unprecedented power, and I am beginning to suspect the sword has more to it than I have yet seen. The faint orange line along its edge, a trace of the magic I have not yet learned to call. I think of the magic line on my panel that sits at 0. Perhaps the deeper power of Oathkeeper draws on magic the wielder must himself supply. The Age of Heroes was a time of magic and monsters, and a hero of that age would have needed more than a sharp blade to earn his name. But Goodwin will not let the lesson become a sermon. Gallon, he says, this sword's power is astonishing, but I beg you, do not learn to lean on it. A knight's strength is never the sword in his hand. Arthur Dane without Dawn is still the greatest swordsman in the 7 kingdoms. A farmer with Oathkeeper would lose to any knight. I understand, sir, I tell him. I do. The sword is the icing. I am the cake. He is satisfied. Switch to the wooden practice sword, he says. Today's lesson begins. His way of teaching me is wonderfully simple. He never has me spar with him. He has spent 2 years building me from the foundation up. Grip. Generation of force from the core. Footwork. Never rushing forward. Never permitting bad habit. My foundation is strong. Now we are working on precision. 2 months ago, he set me to standing before the dummy and to him calling out target areas. Heart, liver, spleen, lungs, head, neck, hands. And I had to whip the wooden sword in and strike that exact spot within a second of his calling it. I can now hit any target he names within a heartbeat. He has moved up to a harder drill, a basket of sour green apples from the hills around the hall. And he stands across from me and throws them, and I, holding the wooden sword like a baseball bat, must strike the apple out of the air. In the first weeks I could not hit any of them, and was hit several times myself, until my brow lost its pride and learned to track. Now I hit 1 out of 3. Goodwin throws at 70% of his strength, which is fast. When I can hit every apple, he says, he will replace them with green dates the size of olives. Fast, accurate, ruthless. That is the heart of the sword, he tells me. I find I agree. We end the lesson when the basket is empty and the sun is sliding low. Goodwin wipes his eyes and looks at the empty basket and tells me, smiling, not to go back to the hall yet. Earl Selwyn has asked him to bring me down to the meadow outside Sapphire Town. There will be an execution before the sun sets. An execution, I say, mopping sweat from my neck with my sleeve. 2 rapists, he says calmly. I nod. In Westeros, rapists are hanged or beheaded. My father, like Lord Stark, carries out the sentence with his own hand, partly to hear any last grievance, partly to make plain the Lord's authority. He has had me watch 2 such executions before. He is already preparing his eldest son to inherit the chair. We mount and ride down towards Sapphire Port through the evening. There are 3 towns on Tarth: Sapphire Town, Swordgrass Town, and Seahorse Town. Sapphire Town is the largest because it sits beside Sapphire Port, the best harbor on the island. Hangings and headings happen on the meadow outside the town walls. By the time we reach it, a crowd has gathered. My father's guard, several knights I know, 30 or 40 townsfolk. Heads turn at our hoofbeats. Young Master Gallon, the cry goes up, and a path is cleared. The hum of conversation thickens when they see the sword at my back. The news has had only a day and a half to spread, but on an island this size, that is enough. The small folk are already whispering that Gallon Tarth, sharing the name of Galladon of Morin, has found Oathkeeper at Morin's Point, and that perhaps the young master is the legend reborn. Within another half-month every soul on Tarth will know it, and I shall not be just the heir. I shall be a name spoken in awe. Father, I greet, and dismount. My father stands in the center of the field with both hands resting on the crosspiece of a heavy greatsword, wearing black leather gloves, his face solemn. He smiles only when he sees me. In front of him kneel 2 men, hands bound, both wretched. One is thin and yellow-haired and limp, his head bowed in resignation. The other is bald and burly and scarred, half an ear missing, eyes savage and fixed on my father. My father wastes no further time. He draws the greatsword from the earth and looks down at the yellow-haired man. Brass, son of Glyn, do you have any words to say in your defense? Brass mumbles, his pale lips parted, and shakes his head and says nothing. My father intones the long sentence. In the name of Heiress II of House Targaryen, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, I, Selwyn of House Tarth, Lord of Tarth, sentence you to die. And at the last word the longsword comes down clean. The head leaves the body in a wet crunch. The blood sprays. The head hits the ground. My heart skips, but only that. I do not need to vomit. I do not even feel ill. Goodwin notices the steadiness of my eye and gives a small approving nod. So do several knights, and the more observant of the townsfolk. My father glances back at me and is satisfied. He turns to the second man, Sagari, son of Mudan. Do you have any words to say in your defense? The bald man, looking at the headless body of his fellow, has been pushed past fear and into rage. Defend what? He sneers. That woman was so moist. I took her. What of it? Who are you to judge me just because you are some damned lord? Sooner or later the heads of you Tarths will be in the dirt too, and the women in your castle will be ravished as that woman was. And that day is not far off. Haha. A brown-haired knight steps in and kicks Sagari face first into the ground and stuffs a filthy rag into his mouth, and ties it there. My father's expression has not changed. He raises the greatsword and begins, "In the name of the Andals," and I all at once interrupt him. "Wait a moment," I say. Every face in the meadow turns toward me. "My father," I say, "could you let me do it? I have no stage fright." I take a step forward. With a clean shing I draw Oathkeeper from my back, and the cyan glow of the blade and the faint dawn line of orange along its edge speak for me where my 8-year-old voice would not. A reason that would have sounded like nothing more than a child's bravado to anyone in this meadow has come to me in a flash. The data on my panel needs judgment points. Judgment points. Surely they come from passing judgment. Surely the way to find out is the man kneeling at my father's feet. "You," my father says, his face a careful mask of surprise, but he sets his sword down. He has told himself twice in 2 days to let me try things that do not match the small shape of an 8-year-old life. Other lords would have shouted at a son for this presumption. He only steps back and nods at me and gives up his place. The meadow goes silent and tight. I stand before the bald man with both hands on Oathkeeper, the blade laid across the back of his neck, and I make my voice as solemn as my body will allow. "Sagari, son of Mudin, your actions have violated the law and your crimes are unforgivable. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death. There is no further hesitation." I lift Oathkeeper and bring it down with everything in me. Cyan and orange flash together with a strange small metallic hum. Sagari's head leaves him and bounces twice on the dirt. There is no spray of blood, which surprises everyone who sees it. The cut neck is charred, and a thin curl of smoke rises from the stump and there is a faint sizzling sound. And that is all. The crowd has gone still. The sword has felt to me like cutting a rope, easy beyond anything a sword should be. The first kill of my new life is also somehow not a thing I find difficult to bear. I can think only of the panel. I pull it up. Gallon Tarth. Title, None. Strength 3.12. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic blank. Skills the same as before. Bloodlines the same. Legendary pet none. Judgment points 2. 2 judgment points. My heart pounds. I have guessed correctly, so this is how the points come in. I do not yet know whether any death will earn them or only an executed criminal earns them, but the principle is now clear. I close the panel without spending the points. I am 8 years old and I am not going to dance with joy after lopping off a head, no matter how sharp the urge. And I look down at the headless body and find I feel only a small distaste, not disgust. A man's corpse is, in the end, not very different from a butchered animal, blood and meat and stilled muscle. It is the spillage of intestines and viscera that the books and shows had taught me to fear, and in this killing there has been almost none. "You did well," my father says, and steps over and lays a hand on my shoulder. He has decided, in his own way, that the bald man's curses provoked me, and that I have done the cleaner of the 2 beheadings out of righteous anger. He approves. He had not thought a son of his would dare to take a head at 8. Many noble children at this age dare not even watch. I look out at the small folk, and they have not dispersed. They are staring at me with the sword still in my hand, and the chant begins low and quiet. Gallon, Gallon, Galadon of Mornay, and grows until 30 or 40 voices are doing it together, half whisper and half prayer, and I do not know what to do with that. I wave at them with what I hope is a faint, dignified smile. "Let's go home, father," I murmur, and he nods, and we ride back to Evenfall Hall. I make some excuse to wash, and I hurry up the spiral stair to the bathtub, where Galena has already laid out hot water. I send her into her alcove. I sink into the warm. I open the panel. The 2 judgment points still sit there beside that awkward little number. I look at the rest. The plus by magic is gray, unspendable. The legendary weapon is maxed, no plus to spend on. There is no legendary pet. That leaves strength, agility, and the bloodlines. I really want to spend 2 points on a bloodline. On the Targaryen one, of course, but I do not yet know what 2 points to a bloodline look like, and if I cannot see the effect after spending, I shall never know whether I have wasted them. So for the first allocation, I shall play it safe, a basic attribute where I shall feel the difference. Strength or agility. After a breath, I choose strength, the most obvious of all sensations. I tap the small gray plus by strength twice with my mind. 2 ghostly golden plus signs flicker. The judgment points line drops to blank. The strength line ticks from 3.12 to 3.14. A wave of heat rises through every part of me at once, hotter than the bathwater by a long way. It is not unbearable. It is something like blood that has begun to boil but has the courtesy not to scald. The heat settles outward from blood into muscle into cell, and I feel it sink at last into bone. A long soft sigh leaves me without my permission. Galena's voice from the alcove asks worriedly if the water is too hot. I tell her no, that I have only strained myself in the afternoon's training, and she relaxes. The interruption has cost me. By the time I have answered her, the warmth has dissipated, and the panel improvement is no longer a thing I can feel happening, but a thing that has happened. I press my fingers against the wooden rim of the tub. The strength is there. It is not Hercules, but it is plain. The fatigue and soreness of the afternoon have vanished. A .02 of strength, in real terms, has done for me what perhaps a week of training would have done. The shape of my future shifts in front of me. If a normal Tarth heir improves from strength 3 to strength 4 over a decade of growth and hard work, that is less than .002 per day. I have just bought myself more than a week. 2 judgment points has bought me more than a week. The implication is enormous, and the constraint is also enormous. I have to find more judgment points, regularly, or this engine starves. I think instantly of the yellow-haired brass whom my father had taken first, before I had spoken up. A wasted prisoner. 2 points, given to the wind. I have to do better. I will have to talk my father into letting me carry out the sentences from now on. I dress quickly, and Galena helps me, and I go down to the hall. My father is playing with Brienne in front of the fire. She breaks into a delighted smile when she sees me. Brother, she calls, and lifts her fat little arms. I cross to them and lift her up. She is heavier than she was a season ago and growing fast, but my new strength holds her without trouble. Do you feel Brienne is a little heavier again? My father teases. He is also faintly puzzled. Brienne is plainly outpacing other girls her age, and Maester Armand saying that she will grow tall is starting to look less like a guess and more like a fact. I tell him she is fine, no weight at all, and pinch her cheek because she will hate hearing herself called heavy, and the little girl is sensitive. She closes her eyes and gives my father a smug sidelong glance. He laughs and tells Claude to have the maid serve dinner. Over the meal he asks me how it had felt today. I tell him it was good and pause. And I tell him slowly I seem to feel an unusual kind of power. What do you mean? I work my words. I felt that Oathkeeper was excited. My father's mouth opens and his eyes widen. Claude, he says without taking his eyes from me. Take Brienne to the kitchens for now. Claude understands at once and lifts Brienne out of my father's arms. Brienne goes unwillingly, but the kitchens are a place of strong attraction for her, and she allows herself to be led. When the hall is empty of any ear but ours, my father leans forward. Galen, what are you saying? I think, I tell him. After I had killed that man, Oathkeeper seemed pleased. It increased my strength. Not by much, but it was unmistakable. I tell only as much as I need to. He is my father, my natural ally, and the lord of the island. 2 of us pulling together will move further than 1 of me pulling alone. He stares at me for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. He half believes me already. My face is not a face that is joking, and I have no reason to make a joke of this. An Oathkeeper is the holy sword bestowed by the Maiden of the Seven, and if any sword in the world might do such a thing, this is the sword. To increase one's strength by slaying the wicked, he thinks. Could his son truly grow into a hero like Galadon? May the Seven bless us. House Tarth shall finally rise. He stops himself and gathers his wits and says, I understand, Galen. After dinner, come with me somewhere. Where, I ask. Outside it is already dark. I will take you to verify what you describe, he answers. I have a fair idea of where he means. We finish the meal. Brienne returns, riding triumphantly on Claude's hip with a blueberry tart in one fist. The wet nurse takes her up to bed for a story. The other servants are dismissed. My father takes a torch in each hand and leads me through the dark courtyard toward the low tower in the southeast corner of Evenfall Hall. Claude asks, mildly, where we are going so late. My father tells him only to bring 2 torches. Claude does not ask twice. The man knows his lord's temper. If the lord has not said, the lord does not wish him to know. A steward learns to do more and ask less. I watch the exchange and find I admire my father all over again. Claude is his most trusted assistant, and yet he is not telling Claude what is happening. Not because he distrusts Claude, but because the fewer people who know a secret, the safer the secret is. He is clear-eyed even in his joy. I had told him just enough of my abilities, and I had been right to do it. The heir to Evenfall Hall I might be, but at 8 I cannot mobilize an island. He can. With 1 word he can take me out at night to farm prisoners. That is what we are about to do. The low tower in the southeast corner sits over Evenfall Hall's dungeon. 2 guards salute as we approach, and 1 opens the heavy door and leads us down a spiral stone stair. The cold rises around me as I descend. The stair opens onto a long corridor lit by torches and iron sconces in the stone walls. From a side room, a tall, lean, slightly stooped, one-eyed man emerges in a gray robe, his greasy hair in disarray. The guard behind us bows, takes back his torch and goes back upstairs. The one-eyed man, my cousin Moen by a branch of House Tarth, addresses my father. My lord, why have you brought Galen down here? It is dark and dirty and might frighten the young master. My father shakes his head. Moen, Galen is not as fragile as you think. Hello, Uncle Moen, I say. He nods at me with surprising softness. Moen had once been a different man. Over a decade ago, in an island raid, his pregnant wife was raped and murdered by pirates, and he has not been right since. My father took the field with him and slaughtered that pirate crew to a man. Moen lost an eye in that battle. The vengeance settled, the rest of him did not. He sank into drink. My father, unable to watch his cousin rot, gave him this post, torturing prisoners for the dungeon of Evenfall Hall. Some pleasure in that work has kept him on his feet these many years. He is short and unpleasant with most of the household. With me he is gentle. Perhaps because I am his lord's son. Perhaps because I remind him of the child his wife had been carrying. Moen, my father says, bring out the Lyseni stowaway from a couple of days ago, in Fisher, the one who killed the merchant Grisha and his family. Make sure they're tightly bound. The eyebrow goes up, but the question stays in. Moen disappears into the dungeon, and returns with 2 men, hands chained behind backs, ankles shackled. One is a Lyseni of extreme paleness, with curly mussed hair and a thin frame and a terrified face. The other is heavily built, sinister-eyed, hook-nosed, perhaps 30, and his name is Fisher. Fisher had murdered the merchant Grisha and Grisha's family in their own house, and made off with a hidden treasure. He had been caught, but the treasure had not. Moen has both gagged with rags secured by extra rope, lest they call out and disturb the young master. Moen, my father says, please step away. This matter is rather important. I will explain when I have time. The curiosity in Moen's eye is enormous, but he nods and goes upstairs to drink with Claude. There are casks of Golden Arbor wine come in with a recent caravan, he tells himself. The dungeon empties of all eyes but ours. I draw Oathkeeper. The blue glow on the blade is strikingly visible in the gloom and the torchlight, and the gloom even seems to make the glow look more beautiful. I think, as I draw, how shrewdly my father has chosen. A Lyseni stowaway who has likely offended a noble in Lys and committed no real crime, and a vicious murderer of a whole family. He is helping me test the rule. Does the sword feed on any death, or only on the death of the wicked? The Lyseni, kicked over to the floor, lets out a low, terrified moan from his throat. I do not waste words for him. I step forward and sweep Oathkeeper across his neck. I do not use both hands. I do not use my full strength, 60 or 70%, single-handed. The cyan arc traces the air. The head goes. There is no spray, only red charred edges and the small curl of smoke. I open the panel. Judgment points, 0. I frown. Nothing. There are 2 possibilities. The first is that judgment requires a true crime, and the Lyseni had committed none worth the sword. The second is that the system has a cooldown, a span of rest before the next valid execution will earn its points. While I am thinking, Fisher is struggling on the ground, eyes growing more ferocious. He had not expected to be brought up at all so late, and certainly not for an heir's sword. His treasure has not yet been wrung from him, and now it seems his throat will not have time to give it. It didn't work, my father says calmly, ignoring the struggling. I shake my head. Try again then, he says, and points at Fisher. He is not disappointed. Fisher thrashes harder, his eyes more savage. I walk over to him, raise Oathkeeper, and in case the procedure must be exact, I make sure to mutter the formula I had used in the meadow. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death. I bring the sword down. Crack. Fisher's head bounces. To Oathkeeper, a body is no more than cardboard. I open the panel. Strength 3.14, Agility 4.1, Spirit 12.8, Skills the same, Bloodlines the same, Judgment points 0. Still nothing. My head begins to ache. The procedure is correct. I have even spoken the formula. Fisher is a murderer with conclusive evidence, a worse criminal than the bald man this afternoon. Why has nothing happened? There must be a cooldown. There must be. It is the only thing that fits, and if I am honest, it is also the right design. Because if there were no cooldown, a man with a holy sword and a panel could grind out invincibility in a single afternoon, and even a dragon would be one stroke before him. The world cannot allow that. I tell my father, Father, it still didn't work. He does not suspect me of having lied to him at dinner. He asks instead what I think the reason is. Perhaps I venture, there must be some time between uses for the effect to renew. He thinks for a moment and nods. I understand, he says. I'll bring you back tomorrow. I almost choke on the gratitude that rises in me. Any other lordly father, hearing such a story from his son and seeing no result after 2 heads taken, would be furious. Mine is already planning the next experiment with me. I give him in my mind a quiet thumbs up. We climb the stair and go out into the night. He tells the guards at the door, when Moen returns, to help him dispose of the bodies in the dungeon. We walk back to the great hall. I go to my room and stare for a moment at the panel and at the inactive 0, and then I close it and tell myself, with my father in this with me, the answer will come. In the morning, Maester Armand teaches me as usual, and Brienne joins us this time. My sister is well behaved, lively as a pup with me, but obedient with the Maester, never rebellious. And when the Maester sets her aside with a picture book, she sits and reads it with serious attention. After my lesson, the Maester goes to her and uses the pictures to teach her first words of the common tongue. The morning passes that way. In the afternoon, I go to the Godswood again to train with Goodwin. We do swordsmanship and archery. Archery is frankly more fun than swordsmanship, and my talent for it is a little stronger. Aiming, drawing, and releasing are all already standardized in this body, and what I lack is only the practice that turns motion into instinct. To my slight surprise, as the lesson nears its end, I begin to hit the center of the target several shots in a row. I open the panel quietly. Archery has gone from 7 to 8%. A small thing, but a real one. I do not know whether the previous Gallon had been at the edge of a bottleneck, or whether the firmness of my new soul has improved my comprehension. Either way, I am pleased. I bid Goodwin farewell and hurry back to the hall. My father is already waiting. A maid hands me a hot towel. I wipe sweat from my face and neck, and follow him again to the southeastern dungeon. The day's guards are different from the night's. Moen is not at the door this time. From deeper in the dungeon, I hear the wet wails of a man being interrogated. My father calls his name. After a while, there is the clang of a door, and Moen comes out wiping bloodstains from his hands on a piece of burlap. My father tells him to bring out 2 prisoners as before. He does not ask. He goes back inside and returns shortly with 2 prisoners, hands and feet bound. The first is a burly old man with a white beard, once a warrior, now a fisherman. Recently, in a quarrel with another fisherman, he held a grudge, and one day at sea he kicked the other man over the side. The man he kicked overboard was not so easily drowned. He washed up alive at Storm's End, came back by ship to Tarth, and laid a complaint with my father. The old fisherman has been waiting in the dungeon for a hearing. The second is a middle-aged woman, panicked, mean-faced. After her husband's death, she had abused his 7-year-old daughter, making her sleep in the pigsty, eat pig slop, beating her with iron tools, until a neighbor reported her. My father had locked her up, intending to choose a day to hang her. Moen kicks her over onto the dirty floor. He does not lay a hand on the old man. The old man kneels, holds his head high, and says nothing. My father waves Moen away. Moen smiles and goes upstairs, perceptive as ever. I draw Oathkeeper. I cross to the woman. In the name of the morning, I sentence you to death, I say without flourish, and bring the sword down in a single clean stroke. Crack. Her head joins the others on the floor. I do not waste a moment. I open the panel. Gallon Tarth. Title, none. Strength 3.14. Agility 4.1. Spirit 12.8. Magic, blank. Skills, swordsmanship 3. Archery now 8. Writing 4. Common tongue, 27. Swimming 29. Legendary bloodlines. Blood of the Evenstar 3. Targaryen 0. Storm King 1. Legendary weapon, Oathkeeper. Gold, maxed. Legendary pet, none. Judgment points 3. I actually got 3. My heart leaps. The cooldown theory has held, and the points have come for the wicked, and the mean-faced abuser of a child has earned me 3 where the bald rapist had earned me 2. The number itself is a quiet judgment of crime against crime. The system rewards the heavier guilt. The kneeling old man watches me with a small puzzled frown. He had not expected the Lord to bring his son to the dungeon to take heads, and he had not expected the boy to wield a sword like that. But his stare matters less to me in this moment than the small word at the bottom of the panel. 3. The world has begun to open. 3 judgment points. I stare at the panel hovering in my mind, and I cannot help being a little surprised, because yesterday I only earned 2 for executing that bald rapist, and today, after taking the head of a woman who tortured her stepdaughter to death, the system has handed me 3. It must mean she carried other crimes I never learned about. Beating, stealing, perhaps worse. And the Holy Sword's judgment weighed her in full. From this I confirm 2 things at once. There is a cooldown of roughly 1 execution per day, and the points awarded scale with the depth of the sin the criminal carried. Now that I understand the rules, I am in a very good mood, and since Father is standing right beside me, there is no reason to wait. I open the panel and let my eyes drift across the numbers. Gallon Tarth, Title none. Strength 3.14, Agility 4.1, Spirit 12.8, Magic blank, Swordsmanship at 3%, Archery at 8, Riding at 4, Common Tongue of Westeros at 27, Swimming at 29. Below that, 3 legendary bloodlines. Blood of the Evenstar at 3% development, Targaryen bloodline at 0, Storm King bloodline at 1. The legendary weapon entry shows Oathkeeper, gold tier, already at maximum quality. Yesterday I spent my points on strength to test the system, so this time I want to experiment elsewhere. I tap the small plus sign beside swordsmanship. 3% jumps to 4% and a cool, clear sensation washes through the back of my mind. The principle Sir Godwin has been drilling into me, the way the wrist should pivot, the line a parry should travel, the timing of a thrust, settle into place with a clarity I never had before. A pulse of warmth flickers through my right wrist and is gone, leaving the joint feeling looser, more responsive, almost as if the bones have been quietly oiled. So 1 judgment point equals 1% of skill proficiency. I decide not to pour the rest into swordsmanship. Skills can be ground out through practice, while basic attributes and bloodlines are far harder to raise on their own. I let my gaze fall on the bloodline section and click the plus next to Targaryen bloodline. A soft buzz vibrates through my whole body. The panel deducts 1 point, and an invisible current rises inside me. Flames seem to leap behind my eyes. My skin goes flushed and hot, and for a moment I see roaring fires in some other place. Dragons wheeling on enormous wings against a black sky. The vision shakes me hard enough that I stumble, and only by driving Oathkeeper's tip into the stone slab am I able to stay upright. Father lurches forward at once, calling my name, his palm pressing against my forehead, and finding skin that feels almost feverish. Even my eyes, he tells me later, were rimmed with a strange orange glow. The reaction passes in only a few breaths. I steady myself against Father's arm and nod when he asks if it worked, and his composure cracks open into a wide, breathless grin he cannot contain. Wielding Oathkeeper to judge the wicked truly does strengthen the wielder. What a gift, what a holy sword the seven have given us. House Tarth is going to rise. He gathers himself quickly, every inch the great noble again, and asks if we should continue. I shake my head and tell him it appears to be a once-a-day effect. We already proved that last night when the second prisoner produced no reaction. Father nods because he had suspected as much. His gaze settles on the white-haired old man bound near the wall, old shaven, who served my grandfather in many wars. Father tells him quietly that he had originally meant to imprison him for a while and then let him go, but he has heard things he was never meant to hear, and so, he is sorry. The blade slides forward in a single decisive motion, the tip vanishing into the old man's back, and a dark crimson flower blooms across his chest. Old shaven grunts once, looks up at me, looks at Father, and his eyes slowly dim, never understanding what the Lord and his son are really doing here. I watch Father wipe the blade and sheath it without hesitation, and I cannot help nodding inwardly. That old man could have been kept for tomorrow's execution, but Father feared a leak in the night and chose not to risk it. Decisive, cold when he needs to be. We climb back to the upper floor of the dungeon, where Moen sits cross-legged in the shadows nursing a flask of wine. Father asks him to dispose of the bodies, and Moen, who can read what has happened from the apologetic edge in Father's voice, opens his mouth as if to ask something, and then closes it again. He cannot quite understand why Lord Selwyn is bringing his 8-year-old son down here so often to kill, but my eyes look the same as ever, and Father's face permits no questions, so he only nods. We return to the great hall, and after dinner I play with Brienne for a while before going up to my room. By the window of my bedroom I open the panel again under starlight. The Targaryen bloodline now sits at 1%, exactly as I expected. I wonder how much further I will have to push the development before a dragon will recognize me as its master, before that legendary fire immunity manifests. The Red Comet, though, is still a long way off, so there is no point obsessing over the dragon line. Outside of dragon riding, the Targaryen bloodline does not seem to add much to raw combat power. I am more curious about what the blood of the Evenstar and the Storm King bloodline will reveal as their development climbs, since both of those belong to me by inheritance and could carry traits I have not even guessed at. With one judgment point still to spend, I tap agility, and the warm current returns. Gentler this time, less of a fire and more of a slow loosening through every joint. 4 or 5 seconds later it fades, and when I shadow step around the room, throwing a few light punches and twists, my body does feel a hair lighter, a hair quicker, though the change is much less dramatic than the strength jump. Agility 4.02, only a tiny gain, but I am not disappointed. The future is wide open. Father is going to back me with everything he has, and judgment points will keep coming. By 16 or 17 I will rival Rhaegar, Robert, even Ned, and perhaps catch Arthur Dayne himself. By 30, when the War of the Five Kings begins, I will be the strongest man in the Seven Kingdoms, perhaps with a dragon at my command. Galadon of Morny reborn, plus a dragon rider. Why should House Tarth not eventually sit the Iron Throne? Father has no idea that his son is already daring to think this far. The next morning I study with Maester Armon and train with Sir Godwyn as usual. Sir Godwyn is openly astonished by the leap in my technique overnight, praising my swordsmanship, my strength, my agility, all visibly improved. And Father, watching from the edge of the Godswood, exchanges a quiet knowing smile with me. After training he takes me down to the dungeon again. Moen has prepared 2 prisoners and slips deeper into the cells the moment we arrive, professional discretion already in place. I judge the first man with a clean stroke, but the panel awards no points. When I ask Father what the man did, he tells me it was poaching. I understand at once. In this world, poaching in a lord's forest is punished by death or by the wall, but in the system's eyes it is not really sin, only a crime invented by lords for the convenience of lords. So the Holy Sword refuses to count it. Father had chosen the man on purpose, an experiment he wanted to confirm. I behead the second prisoner and the panel ticks up by 1 point. When I ask the second man's crime, Father strokes the signet on his finger with a strange expression and tells me incest. The man drove his own son out to sea so he could possess his daughter-in-law and even fathered a child by her. I look at the squat severed head on the floor and feel both disgust and a kind of weary amazement at how lurid human cruelty can be. He deserved to die. Apparently the system grades incest as genuine sin but minor sin, hence 1 point. Father asks if it is effective and I tell him it works, but only modestly. He nods. We have now confirmed the rule. Oathkeeper judges 1 sinner per day, and the deeper the sin, the greater the boon. Fitting enough, it is, after all, a holy sword granted by the Seven, and rewarding the punishment of true evil suits its purpose. From here on, my life settles into a clean, regular rhythm. Mornings with Maester Armon over geography and Valyrian. Afternoons with Sir Godwyn over sword and bow. Evenings spent quietly judging whatever sinner Father has procured. 2 years pass like wind through the sails. On a bright afternoon, Father, Brienne, and I stand at the Sapphire Port docks among guards and household knights, watching for the white sails marked with the Aran Falcon to round the headland. The ship is from the Vale, but the important name on board is Robert Baratheon, eldest son of House Baratheon, on his way home from the Eyrie to Storm's End. The cause of this journey is a small one with enormous future weight. Duke Stefan Baratheon and his wife have given Robert a baby brother, and that brother's name is Renly. Renly Baratheon. I let the name sit in my mind for a moment, knowing exactly which knight in green armor it will one day become, and feel time tightening like a drawn bowstring around me. The continent of Westeros has always run on the fostering custom. Highborn sons are sent to be raised in the halls of equal lords, sometimes as wards to seal an alliance, sometimes as hostages dressed in the same clothes, sometimes simply as a vote of confidence from one father to another that another man can raise his heir better than he can himself. It is an arrangement that frequently outweighs marriage in political weight.